Welcome, everyone. Here we are, back again. Last week, we were in the book of Psalms. Remember how we talked about, if you were with us last week, we talked about be still. All this commotion in our life, but be still. So we can listen for God's voice. It's kind of a preparatory activity for us that we can't expect that if we're busy about doing our own thing and getting caught up in all the things around us and everything that, oh yes, we're just going to hear, when we haven't practiced that. And so we need to, like last week, be still. This week, a little bit different situation for us. We're going to be in the book of 1 Kings. We're going to be in chapter 19. 1 Kings 19, you can see I've got the word out in front of me. You know what to do if you don't have it in front of you. Here we go. 1 Kings 19. The first few verses here, I'm not going to read the verses. These first few just kind of give you the roll of things. Chapter 18, Elijah's been up on the mount with the priest of Baal. Of course, they've cut themselves. They've done all sorts of crazy things, and no water has fallen. Nothing has gone on. No fire from the sky. None of that. Now, important to note, Baal is a storm god. And so nothing from the sky, no bolts of lightning or anything. I mean, he's supposed to control all that. Nothing. Of course, we know what happens. Elijah prays. Fire comes down from heaven, consumes the altar and everything. They look for the rain because it's been a drought for quite some time. Another thing, in the Baal mythology, that drought and all that would have signified Baal's death. Baal is like a harvest god, storm god. What you're seeing there is we've got the rains in the spring and the crops come up and they're all plentiful. Hey, everybody go there. But then it gets colder or whatever, and then the ground goes into a sleep for that winter period. And they're thinking, which in a lot of mythologies we see this with some god during that winter time, we thought he's dead. Just kind of giving you a little background there. So that's where we're at. Elijah has the fire come down because Baal's not in charge of anything. God is God. He is the King of Kings. He is the one true God. All those things happen. Jezebel is the queen. Ahab, the king. Ahab is weak. Jezebel is just sheer evil. She is not happy how everything turned out there. Her priests are now all dead. People weren't happy with that. But false preachers and false priests and all that. Her priests of Baal that were up on that mountain, they're all dead. Elijah is running because the rain has come. They're up on the mountain. He's running to get away from the rain. He runs ahead. Ahab goes back to Jezebel, tells her everything that happened. She's ticked. She's angry. She says, I am going to kill Elijah. By this time tomorrow, he's going to be dead. Elijah gets scared. He runs. He keeps on running. Not Forrest Gump, but he keeps on running. Journeys out into the desert, and he's just like, hey, Lord, I did everything you told me to do. I thought everything was great, and now Jezebel's coming to kill me. Why don't you just take me? I'm all done. I've done everything I could do, and now my reward appears is that I'm going to be killed. I'm finished. This is the end of verse 4. I'm finished. Eternal One, please end my life here and now, even though I have failed. I am no better than my ancestors. Elijah lays himself down under the broom tree, enters into a deep sleep, and while he's sleeping, a heavenly messenger came and touched him and gave him instructions. Get up and eat. Elijah looks, finds a bread cake sitting over charcoal near his head. There's also a jar of water. He ate the food, drank the water, and then he laid back down. Now, he'd been running for his life for like a full day or more, maybe a couple days, so understandably, he's physically shot. So this is not, this is just all, nothing magical here. He's beat. God sends this angel to take care of him. The eternal messengers come to Elijah again, touches him and gave him more instruction. Get up and eat. Your journey ahead is great, and you need plenty of nourishment. Elijah gets up. This is verse 8. Ate the food, drank the water. His body felt strong again. He journeyed for 40 more days and 40 more nights to Horeb, which is Mount Sinai. That's where Moses received the 10 Commandments. When he arrives there, he walks into a cave, and it's time to rest. So this little bit of food that he gets here, whatever amount of food that he gets, the angel makes for him. He takes off towards Mount Sinai, 40 days, 40 nights. Long time to be traveling on foot, out in the desert. He goes into a cave, he's going to rest. We get it. But I've kind of given you a background of everything. We look back at last week, be still. This week, we're thinking about hearing God. To hear him, we have to be listening. If we're not listening, probably not going to hear him. It's no different than with your spouse, a good friend, someone that's speaking to you. If you're not listening, you're not going to hear them. You might be looking right at them and just like your mind's someplace else, you're not going to hear them. You have to be listening. You have to know, in this case, to know this is God. Elijah has had to have spent time talking to God, God speaking to him, Elijah speaking to God, and knowing Elijah knows God's voice, God knows Elijah's voice. There's this symbiotic relationship happening here. And so Elijah's had his time to be still. When he was younger, he learned how to listen for God. And because he was able to listen, he got into a situation to where he cooperated with God, did the whole thing on top of Mount Carmel with the Baal priest, has the victory there. Jezebel says, hey, I'm going to kill you for all this. Elijah's just thinking, oh man. And we've already went through all that. But now here he is in this cave at Sinai, verse 9, and he's resting. God speaks to Elijah. Why are you here, Elijah? What is it that you desire? Because, this is important, as you're learning to understand and recognize God's voice, you're building this relationship with him, God's going to be able to communicate better with you because you can simply hear him better. Not because God's doing something different, you're doing something different. You're actively listening. And so in this relationship, we are to the point to where God's asking Elijah, because they're used to this interchange, both of them, God and Elijah, are used to this interchange, and he asks Elijah, why are you here? What is it that you desire? In verse 10, Elijah tells God, as you know, all my passion has been devoted to the Eternal One, the God of heavenly armies. The Israelites have abandoned your covenant with them. They've torn down every single one of your altars. They've executed by the sword all those who prophesy in your name. I am the last remaining prophet, and they now seek to execute me as well. I'm not sure how he gets here, because we know at the beginning of the chapter, it's Jezebel after him. Maybe, probably inferring here that the people are really on Jezebel's side. They're really into this Baal worship, which we know is a fact. We know Israel is on Baal's side at this point. And so he says, hey, they all just want to kill me because they're just happy with this Baal guy. And even after you showed them, he's nothing. And they still want him. And they want to kill me too. And God speaks to Elijah. He says, leave this cave and go stand on a mountainside in my presence. So they're having this conversation. And this gets kind of spiritualized a lot when it's taught. I don't think it's that difficult to understand. God passes by, the mighty winds separated the mountains, crumbled every stone before the Eternal. This was not a divine wind, for the Eternal was not within the wind. And so basically what we're being told is that Elijah's standing there, big wind comes up, but God's not in the wind. It's simply the wind is blowing. After the wind passes, an earthquake shook the earth. Not an unusual occurrence where he's at here at Mount Sinai. And so, okay, that happens, but the Eternal was not within the earthquake. After the earthquake was over, there was a fire, and this was not a divine fire, for the Eternal was not within the fire. Now, after the fire died out, all these things take time. Elijah's standing there because God says, go on the front of the cave and stand there in my presence. And all these things are happening. And God's not saying so much to him, but these events, these actions are happening. And Elijah sees, he hears, he feels the wind. He feels and sees the earthquake. He sees and feels the fire. The fire dies out. And then there was nothing but the sound of a calm breeze. And through this breeze, a gentle, quiet voice entered into Elijah's ears. He covered his face with his cloak and went to the mouth of the cave. Suddenly, Elijah was surprised. And so here you are, Elijah, these things shake, and he's told to go. He starts going up there. All these things happen. Of course, rocks are falling down with the wind, the earthquake. You're going to pull back into the cave a bit because you don't want to stand out here. First of all, the rocks are going to wail on you. The earthquake came, shaking stuff. More rocks are going to wail on you, so you go inside the cave so you have some protection. But after all that, the fire, the everything, there's a calm breeze. And because Elijah has spent time with the Lord, he understands, he hears. It isn't that he figured this out so much as he knows what God's voice sounds like because he's actually spent time with them, because he's been still and he's heard God's voice again and again. This isn't like that. So if your church that you're in is telling you some nonsense that somehow you can arrive and you're just going to know, that's not how things work. You won't find that anywhere in Scripture. Jesus spends 3.5 years about with these disciples in the New Testament. Why? Why not just snap your hands, snap your fingers, and boom, everything's good? But it's not all good because we're slow. Things take time. We have to get to know God. God understands that. So that way Elijah gets it in his thick head, like we can get it in our thick head. Hey, God knows me. I understand this is what God says. And so we have the still small voice. He covers his face with the cloak because he understands this is God. I mean, he told me to come out into his presence. I know he's here because I know what it feels like when God's here. I know what his voice sounds like. And suddenly Elijah was surprised. So God is a surprising God. God speaks to him. Why are you here, Elijah? What is it that you desire? Because remember at the start of 19, Elijah is a mess. He's a wreck because Jezebel said, I'm going to kill you. He's got all these people, all these Israelites that are just like, yeah, we agree, let's kill him. And so God walks with him for this month or two here, month and a half. He's walking with him. Why? Remember, we're slow. We got thick heads. It takes time for us to get things across. We don't just understand stuff. It takes time. That's everybody. That's you, that's me, your pastor, everybody. We got thick skulls. It's just a fact. So Elijah in verse 14 answers God. He says, as you know, all my passion has been devoted to the eternal God of heavenly armies. The Israelites have abandoned your covenant with them. They have torn down every one of your altars. They have executed all who prophesy in your name by the sword. I am the last remaining prophet. Now they seek to execute me as well. Now, does that sound all familiar? That's because he said it back up in verse 10. But he adds this, they won't stop. They won't stop. Does God just stop talking to him and says, well, you're just a big dummy. I'm not going to stop. I'm just done talking to you. God does not. If you keep reading here, you see that God keeps speaking to Elijah. It's great that God keeps speaking to Elijah, but the real important thing for you and I is that Elijah kept hearing God because he was actually listening for him, because he knew what he was sounding like. God was like, what do you want here? What do you want? What's important to you, Elijah? And God asked you and me the same thing. Hey, what's important to you? What drives you on? What gets you excited? And God wants you to answer when he asks you these questions. He wants me to answer. And we do? Wow, what happens? It's called the conversation. The more conversations you have, the more you know somebody. God is the same. We have more conversations with God, we get to know him. You see this tender knowledge of the intimacy of a relationship with the Apostle John. John is like 100 almost, or about 100 when he writes the Gospels, writes 1st, 2nd, 3rd John, writes the Revelation. In those books that John writes, you're seeing this beautiful presentation of his intimate, special, loving relationship with God. Spending time with him, getting to know him. Has John's life been smooth and easy? No, we know it wasn't. But God was there the whole time. John was talking to God all along the way. And so you see that passion. Last week, be still. This week, listen. Hear God. And as we go along, that is the solidness when the wind blows, when the earth shakes, when the fires rise up and startle us. All that we're not moved by, because it's like, God's not in that. God's not doing that. And the next thing for Elijah is that still small voice, that calm breeze. What it is going to be for you or me at that point, I don't know. Because it's not necessarily going to be the wind, the earthquake, and the fire. There's going to be events like that so that we can get through our thick skulls. This isn't God doing this. This is just stuff. It's just happening. Is God surprised? No. Is God worried about it? No. Has he gone somewhere? No. Has he run away afraid like we see Elijah? Hey, he's startled, he's frightened. No. God, where is he? Right there with us. That's why God says, come out here. Stand in my presence. Because I don't want to be anywhere else. Elijah, my kids, I walk with them. Your challenge, my challenge for this coming week is to understand that so that no matter what, no wind, no earthquake, no fire that comes, look to your right, look to your left. God's been here the whole time. Of course he has. He said, I don't want to be anywhere else. So talk to him. Spend time with him. He sent his son to Calvary to make sure that we get it. That he wants a relationship with us, that he can save us from all these things that we think are so insurmountable. He has it. I will see you again.